Tell me, which leads to a happier life? Couch warming and watching Frasier reruns all day, or rolling a boulder up a hill for the rest of eternity? Well, unless you frequently stalk dung beetles and think I'm him.
You are not him. You are not him.
That should be easy. Put down the ball of shit, pass me the remote.
Why are you like this?
F's in the chat.
And yet, in neither case would we necessarily define the person so devoted as having lived a meaningful life. Well, so in today's quick dive, Suzanne Wolf has all those answers and more that could help you. Hello, Internet. I'm Khalid. And while I'm normally making hour-long deep dives that I'm begging my family not to sit through for my sake, today I wanted to step back and do a shorter video on a bunch of essays that I really liked when I was in my younger years and full of existentialism. Because I'm 30 now, and the skibbity influencers on my phone have made me think I've made peace with the slow creep of death, even though I absolutely haven't. If you find this helps you, hell yeah. Let me know in the comments, and also let me know the most recent meme that you've struggled to understand because of your slowly creeping age.
Bombardiro crocodilo.
This is Suzanne Wolf's The Meaning of Life and Why It Matters from 2010. The book is a summation of 2 Princeton lectures given by Wolf, defining the sum total of what's going on when we equate someone as living a meaningful life. A phrase that Wolf argues isn't so much of a prescriptive term, or one that comes with an objective definition first, that prescribes an ought, but rather a descriptive one. One that aims as close as it can as describing an existent phenomena that, though none of us know definitively, we as a society all generally understand. After all, if we go through life calling things meaningful or meaningless, we must already have a definition for meaning, right?
I want to know what makes life have meaning.
As Professor Stephen Macedo tells us in the introduction, Wolf's subject is not the question of the ultimate meaning of human life, nor does Wolf make it her project to fend off existential dread, nor finally do these lectures propound a particular recipe for constructing a meaningful life. So then, what's the point? Well, as an Australian would say, Wolf's not here to fuck spiders.
I hope no one came here to fuck spiders.
Seconded. Instead, Wolf's intention isn't to target the grand meaning of life, what humanity's end goal ought to be, or why we're here, but instead to target how to find meaning in life now that we are here, and how we discuss it.
One way we talk about that, at least in English, is some lives are more meaningful than others. It's not a question of what were you put on earth to do, but just how can you make your life worth living? Let's just put it that way.
So Wolf's one and only goal is to try to set more clearly what it is we mean when we're in our group chat dunking on our friends in the fidget spinner tournament and saying his life might be void of meaning. And that's coming from me. And like all my life is dressing up and playing D&D. Let's jump in. Recording. All right, here we go. Let's do it again. So how exactly does Wolf find meaning? Well, the first thing is, in order to detail the capital M meaning, which seems to actually point out a value judgment of a set of actions, why they're meaningful, we need to first figure out the aims that any action is valued against, or why anyone does anything. What she calls the models of human motivation.
My motivation is motivation. Okay, bye.
Now, if you're thinking of Maslow's pyramid, you're thinking way too specifically. Take a step back. In fact, she grants motivations are generally split into 2 departments. 1, a sort of psychological egoism, a self-interest, or 2, in accordance with an impersonal higher order. Say Kant's reason or deontology, or Thomas Nagel's third eye omniscient view, or a view from nowhere. Take a day in your life. You wake up at noon because it makes you happy. You go to a park and trip a kid that runs by because it's legal and it makes you happy. You go to your corporate job and file bureaucratic work because money makes you happy. This is the life of a psychological egoist, or a philosophy stating that anyone's actions are necessarily done for their own self-interest, even actions that could seem altruistic.
You gotta look out for number 1.
Number 1 is me, asshole!
So if we took it even farther, egoism says that even donating all of your life savings to cancer research, or Mr. Beast saving 1,000 people's eyesight, are all ultimately motivated by self-interest, if it makes you happy to get views, or to make money, or to live in a world where people have healthcare. Imagine that. Opposed to the egoistic perspective in Wolf's mind is the impersonal perspective. That objective reasoning for doing things. It sounds a lot like,
because it is the right thing to do.
Why would you wait in line or go to war? Not because either of them do anything to your self-interest, but because they appeal to the reason of being the right thing to do. And the sacrifice for reason makes sense to you.
Worth it.
So here we have 2 models of human motivation. The egoistic perspective, the purely self-interested one that leads to maximized pleasure, almost falling in line with Epicurean hedonism, and the impersonal perspective, doing whatever it is reason would say is the right thing to do. But Suzanne, what if there are a third reason? What if happiness and duty weren't the only things that lead to human motivation? What if the world is just too nuanced for that? What if, heaven forbid, You had to help a friend move. See, Wolf starts to ask, what about those things from which you derive neither bare, unstressed happiness, nor the reasonable feeling of doing the right thing? What motivates those actions? Well, for Wolf, there happens to be a third motivator.
So this is love.
That's right, Suzanne's big third reason for human motivation is love. Go figure. But there's a method for not looping love in with the other two. As Wolf states, my claim is that reasons of love, whether of human individuals, other living creatures, or activities, ideals, or objects of other sorts, have a distinctive and important role in our lives. They are not to be assimilated with reasons of self-interest or reasons of morality, insofar as we fail to recognize and appreciate the legitimacy and value of these reasons. We misunderstand our values and ourselves and distort our concerns. See, not everything can be boiled down to happiness or duty. Whether we're helping a friend move, staying up all night to sew our kid's Halloween costume, or visiting someone in the hospital, there seem to be things that we are just driven to do out of love for the broader picture.
Call an ambulance!
In fact, in English, we kind of already have a term for these things: labors of love. Think about folks like Charles Bukowski, who spent his life devoted to poetry. Not in his words for any happiness whatsoever, but rather to contribute to the concept of poetry. Quick side tangent, I read Ham on Rye a while ago, and there's this scene where his best friend knocks on his window and holds up like a vial of his own semen. It's unironically the funniest thing I've ever heard in an audiobook. Now, the caveat for all these reasons of love is that they don't all necessarily lead to a good on the object of the love that you're doing. For example, when you don't actually know what's best for that object, or when you put too much love into something that's not worthy of that object. But even still, Suzanne writes that positively engaging in a worthy object of love can still be perfectly justified. So we found something that we love doing, and it fills our heart with what Aristotle would call eudaimonia, or human flourishing. Our life is meaningful, right? Well, not necessarily. After all, imagine a friend of yours whose life is completely devoted to just sitting on a couch binging sitcom episodes. And I mean literally doing nothing else, not contributing to a larger picture.
Yeah, both of our lives suck.
Though this person could be overwhelmingly happy to do this, we'd be hard-pressed to say that they've lived a meaningful life. And for those of you who might see this as a harsh way to judge others, you're probably right. And Wolf agrees with you.
If these are real people, you can say, like, what is it you're getting out of this? You might discover that there is actually something more valuable. And then I'm saying, okay, bad example. Get rid of that example and move on.
But this investigation of meaning is less for you to judge others and more as a tool for you to self-analyze and lead to a sort of epiphany. Unpause. For a better understanding of why happiness doesn't necessarily lead to a meaningful life in her view, let's look at a case study that you're more familiar with. For those of you who are like eagle-eyed, I had to move this sword over here because my cat kept knocking it over where it used to be. It's not so that I can have clout with the Zelda audience. Besides, I don't need to. Okay.
You ever read Sisyphus, the Camus thing?
This is Sisyphus. Not exactly the Camus thing, but you've heard the story.
The myth about the guy who pushes an enormous rock up a hill only to have it keep rolling back down again.
Sisyphus is cursed by the gods to repeat the same action over and over again for all of eternity.
Whoa, kinky.
No bathroom breaks, no calls from his friends, just loneliness. Imagine that, it's terrible. So much so that Webster's dictionary defines Sisyphean as requiring continual and often ineffective effort. If there was a story to show meaninglessness, this is she. In fact, Camus himself famously dropped bars in the myth of Sisyphus when he said that in order for someone to go through life in such an absurd, meaningless existence as this one is,
One must imagine Sisyphus happy.
Bullshit, he's miserable.
and Wolf, a massive fan of Camus, does just that.
He was the one that started using it as a paradigm of absurdity or meaninglessness.
Right.
Instead of Sisyphus' eternal suffering of rolling a boulder up a hill, what if we were to imagine, as Richard Taylor has suggested, what if you were injected with a sort of drug that not only dispensed serotonin and dopamine, but tricked the poor guy into thinking that he was ecstatic to do this act. In fact, it brought him more joy than all of the Dionysus Molly he could ever have.
Sisyphus achieved happiness in that absurd repetition. Any French philosophy post-Rousseau is essentially a magazine.
Does this happiness mean a meaningful life? Well, to the rest of the world that he's still a part of, maybe not. After all, it's still just rolling a rock up a hill, even if he feels fulfilled.
I have an addiction.
Same goes for someone lobotomized or even tricked by a drug into thinking that they're happy, or as Camus would say, even religion. What makes him happy is subjective. Hey Khalid, I still don't get it. Why shouldn't happiness be the end-all be-all of meaning? Well, I'll tell you why. It's for the simple reason as that's not how we use that word. And stop talking back to me. This is my video. See, this goes back to the descriptive way that the argument is laid out. Instead of providing a normative analysis that would confer an ought for how we ought to find meaning, Woolf is concerned instead with what our discourse already tells us about how we interact with the concept. Why is it, she asks, that people like Gandhi, or Mother Teresa, or Einstein are seen as having meaningful lives, but not those that are just happy, like Kim Kardashian or Dan Bilzerian?
My diamond earring came up in the ocean and it's gone. And there's people that are dying.
In her case, the subjective happiness we feel is only one part of three major parts of what make up meaning, which we're lucky enough to get when Woolf finally lays out her magnum opus statement.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
Meaning arises from loving objects worthy of love and engaging with them in a positive way. It's that easy. Let's break this down. The first part, loving objects, is the subjective happiness of loving what we're doing. It's Sisyphus loving the boulder, it's you loving paperwork. Neither of them in themselves constitute a meaningful life.
Hooray! Everything is meaningless!
But the second part, objects worthy of love, that's the objective value. And that's much more tricky because it involves what we talked about earlier with the view from nowhere.
Someone should be writing these down.
Meaningfulness as a concept seems to revolve around the act itself being commonly identified as being worthwhile. The tricky part is where this is easy to imagine as a sort of hierarchy in the utilitarian sense, but it's actually referring to is contributing to anything, just anything that's much larger than yourself. As long as it's something independently sustaining outside of your subjective viewpoint, it works. As Woolf writes, living in a way that connects positively with objects, people, and activities that have value independent of oneself harmonizes with the fact that one's own perspective and existence have no privileged status in the universe. In our lives, that could be contributing to the existence of music in our society, or even to the history of automobiles as it pertains to our history. For Sisyphus, we can imagine a scenario where even as it seems useless to him to keep rolling that boulder up the hill, maybe as it rolls back down, the kinetic energy charges the electricity for a city down below, thereby contributing to a good that's much larger than him and outside of his subjectivity. This she calls the fitting fulfillment view. So what are we left with? Let's sum it up. In Woolf's definition of a meaningful existence, an agent must engage positively with something that they love doing, that contributes to something much larger and outside of themselves. The subjective and the objective. A combination of the egoistic and impersonal, working together to create meaning while positively engaging in it. Sisyphus loves rolling his boulder, which actively contributes to something much larger than him and outside of his subjectivity, and keeps him from thinking that he is the center of the universe.
The problem in saying, oh, the human race is just like Sisyphus. It's not true that our lives are just matters of rolling the stone up the hill and down again so that if only we liked it, it would be meaningful. We can do more with our lives than roll a stone up our hill or play Sudokus. We can do all kinds of things from writing poetry to creating world peace.
The hardest part of philosophy is figuring out how exactly to apply it. One could study Kant or Jeremy Bentham for the rest of their lives, and in so doing lose out on all the wonderful, beautiful moments that it means to be a human being in favor of overanalyzing how to be the perfect moral paragon every second of the day. In reality, we just don't have time for that. Not you, or I, or anyone. That goes for decision paralysis or the pits of nihilism. While Camus champions the absurd that in a world without cosmic theism, it is useless to search for objective meaning, Woolf seems to have a point. That meaningfulness, at least on a small scale, is something to be found around us, just waiting for us to interact with it. This maxim, that meaningfulness arises in positively engaging with something that's much larger than myself, is what I use to analyze how I live my life every day. Whether it's contributing to a community, an artistic pursuit, or even to making these videos with you guys. And while it's not a perfect tool, nothing is. Don't be absurd.
The fact that you can't make a big splash is something you just have to accept and get over. But you can make a good splash. Do something good. Do something you can be proud of. And in that respect, even though we're not doing a lot, I think we're kind of harmonizing with the fact that we are just a speck in a world full of other equally valuable specks and lives. So I kind of want to harmonize with the universe rather than be important to it.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this shorter video. God, this took so long. How do people do this? Like, comment, subscribe, whatever people do. Let me know if you like these at all. At this point, I'm just making them for myself so I can keep talking. Have a good year. Yeah, yes, bye. Love you. Bye. Bye. Oh God.